Welcome again. And yeah, we will sit for about 20 minutes. I'll give some guidance. You can listen, or you can always mute me if you want quiet. So just settling into your sitting posture. You can close your eyes or just lower your gaze. Bringing the attention into the body, into the felt experience. Letting the body soften, having a sense of releasing any tension, relaxing the jaw, softening the belly. Can move the attention through the body, just kind of touching on the different sensations in the face, in the shoulders, in the arms, and the hands, on the torso, and the legs, and the feet. And feeling the body breathing. What is felt within the breath. Is there a mood or a mind state that's predominant right now? When we take this time to be still, to be quiet, we might get a sense of what's going on beneath the surface. It's so easy to distract ourselves, to be busy. And then when we stop, we discover what's going on. It's like the underground of our life. When we first encounter this, it can be troubling, it can be difficult. Much of the way our culture is designed is to allow us to not touch this, to never really look inside. And so we develop a kind of resistance of fear, a fear of feeling, a fear of being fully present. Mindfulness can help us to develop the capacity to be with this experience without running, to see that there is nothing to fear. We can hold this. That in fact, this is where the richness of life lies, beneath the surface. If we sit with the stillness long enough, the fear and the resistance fades, and we open into that natural inner place of peace that we all contain. We can't just put ourselves there, or manifest that peace at will. But if we work with this simple practice, give it time, it will naturally unfold. Our job is not to seek after peace, but let go of whatever obstructs that moment by moment. And so, as our minds wander, get lost, we gently return over and over. locked in. Uh, so we're still trying to get started in step 6. It's a slow rollout here. Um, I have a lot of notes just on the opening section. Last time I was talking about the different things that we cling to, material things, sense pleasures. Spent some bunch of time on views and opinions, attachment to relationships, talking about the sutta, born from those who are dear. Um, but the thing that perhaps is the biggest issue, especially regarding step 6, is our attachment to self, which even that term is the term self is one that's got a lot of issues with it, trying to even sort of define it. But in the simplest terms, when the step 6 says we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, and sort of, as usual, putting aside God for the moment anyway, something that comes up, I think, is more part of step 7 in my thinking. But it's the defects of character are the thing that we have to let go of. And what we discover when we're sort of in this process often that that we cling to them uh, as a kind of source of identity, that they kind of define us, and then to let them go can seem risky or threatening, because there's sort of this question: who am I going to be without my defects? And indeed, we might have sort of defined ourselves by them, and not really necessarily thought of them as defects, and just in the simplest terms, just by calling our behavior as addicts before we sort of took on the mantle of being an addict or an alcoholic, started to call ourselves that behavior was a lot of what defined us, you I think. I mean, and again, I'm talking, I'm sort of talking in the first person plural, and I don't really assume that everybody has this exact experience, but I'm trying to sort of capture what I think is generally kind of common, and sort of allow you guys to sort of sort out for yourselves which parts resonate for you. But certainly, so I'll get back to first person singular to stay a little safer here. Certainly, for myself, um, from the earliest experiences of drinking and using, that those behaviors were part of my identity, that I liked. I wanted to be those things. When I first started to drink, I liked the fact that it seemed like something that adults do, and it was sort of dangerous and like breaking rules, and I liked all of that. And when I started to smoke pot, it was the late 60s, and it was being part of a culture, and it was a counterculture, very much going against the mainstream, and it was illegal, and it was rebellious, and so it defined me, and I wanted to be that. So, um, and over time, those both those things stopped being so much about rebellion, and they just became, of course, habits and addictions. But again, those habits, that lifestyle, then it kind of becomes a lifestyle, right? Became just so much a part of identity that, again, the idea of letting go of it was very threatening. Like, who am I going to be without that? And besides all the associations, because certainly I continued to have a certain sense of being outside of mainstream culture and wanting to be a rebel in some ways, not wanting to live a conventional life. And so the idea of sort of letting that go and becoming a conventional person was alienating to me. Wasn't what I wanted to do. So that's where I think step 6 really becomes the challenge. There's a lot of work we have to do in terms of letting go of behaviors and really looking at things, but in the way we live. But fundamentally, it's that identity that we cling to that's the problem. And when anybody who's been around recovery for a while and who's tried to help other people get into recovery, this becomes even more clear when we try to help somebody and we see how they rebel and we see how they resist letting go and we see what they cling to. So it's maybe easier to see in another person than it is to see in ourselves when we're going through it. Uh, so there's a story, and I think I might sort of cop this. I think I put this in. I'm not sure if it's in One Breath at a Time. It's in one of my books of someone approaching a teacher and talking about having some problem, and the teacher saying to them, "Well, have you tried this?" And the person's like, "Oh no, I couldn't do that." "Well, how about that?" "Oh no, I couldn't do that." "Well, maybe you should try, this thing." "Oh no, I couldn't do that." And finally, the teacher just saying, "Well, I guess you just don't want to change." And that's kind of this what we're talking about here. That we come to recovery and we move through our lives saying, "Oh, I want my life to be better. I want to grow. I want to change." And then when faced with the actual work and what's required, we balk. As the word that's in the big book. Uh, a word that's rarely heard outside of the realm of baseball, but we balk. And for those who don't know baseball, don't worry about it. Just means that we refuse to do it. In baseball, actually, anyway, no, don't even. Nobody knows what a balk is. It has to do with something a pitcher does. They start to move towards the plate and then they don't throw it. Anyway, um, so see, and that's what I do to myself. Now I've balked myself out of the game here. Yeah, I was talking to Walt Opie the other day about teaching online. He said that Joseph Goldstein just turns off the screen so he can't see anybody, which is just the opposite of what I do. I like to look at everybody, but of course he's teaching 750 people at a time, so that could get confusing. Um, but the reason I bring that up is that sometimes sitting here in my office, uh, it's sort of unreal, right? That I'm teaching. Am I teaching? I don't know. Um, so but this question of identity then I think becomes central to this whole uh, process, the work of recovery and further the work of spiritual growth. And it is at the heart of Buddhist teachings as well as the heart of 12-step work. And the we'll come back to this, I'm sure, many times, but it seems like a relevant time to bring up that the 12 traditions, the 12th tradition says that anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. And so this idea of anonymity, which was originally adopted I believe mostly to protect the reputation of the early members of AA who were worried about what would happen to them professionally, particularly and socially, if people found out they were admitted alcoholics. But the spiritual aspect of anonymity is looking at identity and clinging to identity and letting go of identity. And when we look at step 12, when we, having had a spiritual awakening, the result in the next thing that it's suggested that we do, having had a spiritual awakening, we tried to carry this message. And what I believe is the underlying meaning of a relationship of those things is that the spiritual awakening itself is awakening to the emptiness of self, and that pursuing, attempting to satisfy that empty self is fruitless and pointless, and that the natural response to spiritual awakening is to help others, is to carry the message, is to stop thinking about yourself because you're thinking about something that's empty, that's unsatisfiable. Yeah, it's unsatisfiable. Is there a better word than that? Am I missing something? Not satisfied, not capable of being satisfied. Uh, and so again, I think this is where so much of the work comes back down to in this practice and in this program. Where do the conflicts happen in our life? They usually happen with the in our relationships when we are clinging to something, and it's about ourself. It's about what I want, who I am. Very often our conflicts come when we feel threatened, when our ego feels threatened. And so looking at that attachment, you know, and really seeing where it's getting in the way of freedom, I guess is the lofty term to use. Um, that I think is the work, the work of recovery, certainly the work of step 6. Are you entirely ready to let go of your defects of character? Yeah, and even I obviously defects of character isn't the most appealing phrase in the steps, like a few others that are troubling, and I think it's in fact too narrow a definition, really, because I think there's things we have to let go of that are not necessarily defects or shortcomings, but they are things that uh, get in the way of our happiness and the happiness of those around us. So that again, it comes back down to just looking at all the things we're clinging to. What are we clinging to? Well, might go actually to the book here. Yeah. So I'm still on the beginning of step 6 where it says, uh, I'm quoting someone saying that when it came down to it, I realized there were a lot of things I didn't want to have removed. My lust, my laziness, my anger. In fact, I actually wanted to hang on to most of my character defects. This seems to be a common addictive pattern. Letting go sounds nice in theory, but when faced with the reality, change isn't so easy. Well, it makes me think, I was listening to a podcast yesterday and they were talking about New Year's resolutions. Perfect example, right? It's it's we're all it's this thing people do, right? Speaking of, time and space being unreal. New Year's resolutions are unreal, right? And they, they are a perfect example of people saying they want to change, saying they want to let go. And this was Pod Save America, and they went back through the resolutions they made last year. Like, I think they played the tape of last year's resolutions, and then they're like, "No, I didn't do that. No, didn't do that. No." And it was just that kind of recognition that what that it's hard to change, that we say we want to change, but we don't really want to. I mean, probably everybody here at one point in their life said, "I really should stop, you know, drinking like this, taking drugs like this, eating like this, gambling like this, whatever it is," right? And then just went back, continued to do it. I mean, we wouldn't be addicts if we didn't do that, and if we didn't have that conflict. So this really brings us to what for me then is another like key and really just always persistent question that comes to in steps 6 and 7, which is how do we change? How do we change? How do we let go? Because it does happen, you know. Here we are. There's 41 people on here that are hopefully a testimony to that. Maybe some of you are, you know, not all in. I hope you are. Hope you're getting there if you're struggling. But this question, how does this happen? Yeah, because okay, I'm at step 6. I'm ready, but I don't believe in God, or what does that mean? God's going to remove my defective character. How do I? How is this supposed to happen? You know, and that's where the work comes, and I'll probably saying the same thing a lot over the next couple months as we do step 6 and 7. Um, but there's a piece here. Um, hmm. Step 6 pushes us further in our trust and commitment to a process that sometimes doesn't have much appeal. We've looked at ourselves honestly in steps 4 and 5, but now we have to do something about what we've discovered. We have to be ready to change. What gives us the courage to take this step is the sensitivity to our own pain, which develops as we work through the steps. When I read that recently, I said to myself, is that true? What gives us the courage to take this step is the sensitivity to our own pain, which develops as we work through the steps. And it is one of my kind of central arguments about recovery. And it's kind of what this step in this book becomes about. I'll read a little bit more. At each step and each level of honesty, we see and feel more in our minds, in our hearts, in our emotions. As this ability to feel becomes more refined with the increasing clarity of sobriety, and today I would have written that more generally, not just sobriety, but it's the language of this book. As this ability to feel becomes more refined with the increasing clarity of recovery, it becomes more painful, or we become more aware of the pain, to hold on to the self-destructive aspects of ourselves. So that's the thesis, that fundamentally that we only let go when we feel the pain, when we feel it strongly enough. And I don't know if that's exactly true. I mean, yeah. Um, because clearly some people never let go, they never let go of their addiction. And so I don't like, I don't want to make simplistic answers or answers that only work on some single level. So I want to kind of a little bit back off from this claim in this book and just make it more, I can't think of the word, but sort of tentative, not so absolute. Um, I think that this is a really important part of letting go. But let me uh, explain this a little bit more. My thinking on this and what I'm saying here. That I'm not sure how clear it is. What I'm saying in this paragraph, that the idea is that our initial impulse into recovery comes because of pain. Uh, that the pain of our addiction becomes stronger than the pleasure of our addiction, or the just the clinging of the addiction. And then my thesis is that as we let go of our primary addiction, we become more sensitive. We're more awake and aware. We're less numbed. And then we start to feel new layers of pain, which inspire new layers of letting go. So those can also be sort of addictive, like, the alcoholic who discovers that their eating is unhealthy, or, you realize, oh, my behavior around my sexuality is unhealthy. And it can be a lot of behavioral stuff, but then of course it comes down to the internal, the inner life, where we are clinging to beliefs, clinging to views and opinions, clinging to beliefs about ourself, clinging to anger, clinging to emotional patterns. And uh, the my suggestion is that as we do this work, the so-called peeling the onion, not my favorite image, but just because it just feels like just there's more layers. And anyway, I don't know. Uh, as we as we do this work, each time we let go of one thing, it allows us to feel more, and then we feel the kind of the next thing, and that there's a kind of process that maybe resolves itself. Um, and if we look at it from a Buddhist view, I'm going to claim this is a Buddhist view. Let's say it's Kevin's Buddhist view, is that that enlightenment is kind of this, and that it's that the center is empty. The center is there's no clinging. That the awakening, nirvana, is when there's just no holding on to anything anymore. So that this process goes on of letting go of things until maybe it's not so much that there's nothing to hold on to. It's just that there's no holding on. Um, so um, so that's one way of viewing this process, this step process, the recovery process, the spiritual process of a these the touch tone of spiritual growth, right? Is the touching pain, and at each level of pain, there's a further letting go, and a further demand that we let go, and that we, hopefully that we uh, become comfortable with that process and become uh, participants in the process. That is, we kind of are really looking to it. We're looking for it. Oh, is there pain? Is there clinging? Rather than having it be forced on us, as it often is in in the early stages of recovery, where we're just having to face things. But but that eventually we become really like, oh, looking, oh, wow, what else can I let go of? How can I be more free? So, some thoughts for the morning, or whatever time of day it is. Um, and someone has posted a question regarding self. Are we defined by our addiction? Do I identify as an addict? Is this skillful? All good questions. You know, I just think it's a very personal question. Um, you know, uh, uh, certainly the traditional 12-step approach is, you know, I'm an addict, I'm an alcoholic, that's the most useful thing to do. But increasingly, I'm seeing, this kind of modern recovery movement uh, moving away from that. And, as far as I'm concerned, it's really what works for you. Uh, there's, I think it's important to consider why and to come to understand in a meaningful way why people like me continue to say, I'm an addict alcoholic. Why would somebody who's been clean and sober for 35 years say that? And is there what is the value of it, rather than just looking at the negative side of it, which is easy to sort of see. Um, but but if one honestly confronts that, it's what I was talking about, I think, last time, about a red line. That I think it's about having a line, and for me, saying I'm an addict alcoholic, like, defines this red line in my mind, that it's very clear that I don't do that. And whatever it takes for you to have some kind of a line that inside you, you don't do that. That's useful. It's just that the risk is that it's like, well, I don't want to call myself that. And, then we sort of drift away from believing that we have a problem. We start to be like, well, if I'm not really an alcoholic, you know, then I guess I can have a drink, sort of, which is always ironic, since if you're not an alcoholic, why is the first thing you want to do is have a drink? But anyway, my that's one of the older jokes that I've been telling for about 15 years. So uh, evergreen, as they say. Um, so Angela has put in some information in the chat. A lot of things to click on if you're a clicking person. Um, but yeah, there's the last thing in there is the Vimla Sara's New Year's Eve. It's great. So anybody want to speak up?
Hey, Kevin, I'm Dana. How are you?
Hi, Dana. Nice to see
Hey,
you.
you too. I was reading this part that you read. We have to be ready to change. What gives us the courage to take this step is the sensitivity to our own pain, which develops as we work through the steps. And I've discovered in my own recovery, all of this awareness is painful. And like you said, it's
Yeah,
just new painful awarenesses, and I get frustrated because it's painful. And
yeah,
it's like, okay, well, I have the awareness. How do I let go? And I still struggle. I haven't made it to that step yet. So I still struggle with, how to let go. But what I'm interpreting here with your statement about the sensitivity to our own pain is just that self compassion component,
right.
which is so important, obviously, in Buddhism as well, is the compassion piece. So yeah, I struggle with the frustration of painful awareness that just keeps coming and coming, and I keep saying like, okay, so when are things going to change? So I
Mhm.
don't know if you can speak to that, but those were my thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Dana. There's a few things there, and it's complicated, and I don't know that I have the answer. I have some thoughts that a change happens through action. It doesn't happen through, prayer. uh, I mean, prayer can be part of the change, but and this again is sort of more like step 7, but it's all part of the same thing. Is that this idea that, fr- that we change through thought by changing thoughts, words, and deeds. So our investigation through mindfulness reveals particularly the thoughts, but the rest as well, the things that are counterproductive. And we apply that mindfulness, think of it as the Eightfold Path. We see the things through with mindfulness, and then we apply the effort to change. Okay, this negative thought is showing up. I intervene. As, as you said, something like self-compassion. Those negative thought patterns, become more aware. Again, I see it as like I become aware of it because it hurts, but that's not the end point. Like that's just the beginning point. It's like, oh, this hurts. Why does it hurt? Oh, because I'm thinking in this way that's really negative towards myself. What are things that I can do to counterbalance that? First of all, I could just let go of the thought. Okay, but that doesn't always work. So then sometimes I need something, direct, like you said, self-compassion or loving kindness toward myself, or I need to change what I'm doing. Like, if I'm just sitting and I'm in some negative space, I need to get up and go, do the dishes or what, I mean, just like take my mind to a different place. So I'm not focusing on that. But fundamentally, when it's a repetitive negative quality, it's something that I have to keep confronting and intentionally letting go of and creating, I guess, a new narrative, right? A new a new way of thinking about that. And so part of that, again, the Eightfold Path is right view, is singing, oh, that thought that I'm having is not true. It's not really, and sort of arguing against it repeatedly, saying, oh, I recognize that. I see you, Mara, as the Buddha says. I see you. I see what you're trying to do to me, and I'm familiar with you, and I know you're deeply ingrained in me, but you're lying to me. You're creating suffering for me. I'm not playing that game. We have to kind of push back. So it's that right view, right intention, mindfulness, effort. It's that whole engagement to keep responding. The one thing I would say, though, is that we can't, if we shortcut this process, like, oh, I'm just going to throw some self-compassion in there so that I don't feel this, then we're not really, I don't know. That's just like a thought that came up as you described that. I was like, wait, I think maybe you're getting ahead. Like, you've got to really see the truth of the lie. You have to be willing to see it and see the pain that it's causing, because that's what, again, what I'm saying in the book is that's what I think gives us the real determination to let go, is seeing the pain. And mindfulness itself can help us to develop an inner strength and courage to be with the difficult, to not have to turn away just from it, that we can be with it. And then, it's that moving through it rather than trying to get around it or jump over it. Um, I see a virtual hand raised, and it is 11:01, and I do have to go, but I hope it's a really easy answer that I can give you. Go ahead, Monica.
Um, I'm hi, I'm Monica.
Hi, Monica.
No, I was just going to, it was just comments. So I was just going to say I have a disease that tells me I don't have one. So
Yeah,
and I've been learning a lot, the thought process that has been, those have been aha moments, that all these thoughts and that obsessions that are creating suffering,
yeah,
so if anybody's new, I encourage you
yeah,
to just take it one day at a time,
yeah.
and
Thanks.
that's it. I know you're
Thanks,
right.
Monica. That's
Okay.
great. Yes. The disease that tells me I don't have it. So before I go, someone did ask me, would will your daily reflections have an index? They will not have an index. However, I have put the table of contents on my website, and I in the preface, I think it's in the preface of the book, I give the link to see the table of contents, and that way you can search different topics, because the book is so long that I couldn't like add any extra pages. I couldn't have an index or even put a table of contents. Table of contents would be like 15 pages long. So, and the book is already 369 pages or something crazy, which I'm not sure how it's going to come out. So, all right, you guys, great to see everybody. Thank you for coming. Happy
Kevin.
New Year. I will see you on Friday night if you appear.
Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
And
Thanks, Kevin.
we'll
Yes,
continue
Kevin.
on
Sure.
into the
Thanks, Kevin.
next year of COVID, which is going to end
Yeah.
soon. We're all going to be.
Thank you,
Got
Kevin.
this.
Thank
healed.
you.
Bye,
Thank
you
you.
guys.
Kevin,
Thanks.
congratulations on the book, man. That is
Thanks,
so
George.
exciting.
Thanks, man. Yeah. All right. Peace.
Peace out.